Oh, yay, alive!
Yay! Hello.
Hello. Oh, so I didn't get my wooden eggs finished last week. I figured I'll finish them now, and then I will thank myself next Easter when I'm frantically looking for something to give
Checks
the children.
out.
Right? How's your day?
Long. As I said, I was hijacked by a wild 2-year-old on my way to the podcast today. He came upstairs going, Hawaii, Hawaii, which is his name for me. And I was like, yes. He was like, Dow. So we went downstairs. and then he flailed about and had his plastic submarine give me kisses. It was very cute.
Aww.
How was your day?
Good. I didn't get as much painting done as I wanted to, but I did get tellurium a lot closer to done. He fought me. And it was so funny. You'll understand when you see it, but tellurium is insouciance. It's kind of a sense of humor sort of card. And so I've got a satyr and he's dancing on a CD because that's the technology that it's mostly used for. And he's wearing some garlic and he's got his arms spread out. And I was like, he's a little plain. He sort of needs a scarf. And then I was like, is that a little too, I don't know, heavy? And then I was like, shame on you. We're trying to break these stupid taboos. Of course it's not too femmy. And I put a scarf on him and it looks stunning. It looks really, really good. It's so sad to me that 100 years ago, women sacrificed a lot to earn the right for us to wear pants, but no one's done the same for our boys to wear skirts.
It wasn't even 100 years ago. It was like in the 40s, like 80 years ago. But yeah, it's true.
It started in the 20s, divided skirts, because the first bicycle designed for females was a side saddle bicycle, and some woman went, no. That's not happening.
I don't even get how that would work.
It didn't. That's kind of the point. It was pathetic, and it was like, no, we're done with this nonsense, and it needs to happen for the boys. I don't have any truck with men's movement. I think it's a little misguided in a lot of ways, but I also think my little boys. What's that?
It's based on toxic masculinity. Most of what the current men's rights activists do. I was like, whoa, we want to go back to when we hunted the mammoth. And it's like, mammoths thin on the ground.
Yeah.
Thin in the air. Generally pretty trim.
Thank you, Eddie. We love you. Yeah, I want my boys to be allowed to grow their hair long, wear fingernail polish and high heels and makeup if they want to, and still be straight. That can't be something where you are suddenly partitioned off or treated crummily. I'm tired of it. But it's in your head, right? Like me trying to put a scarf on tellurium. I was like, I don't know, will his classmates tease him? And then I cried myself.
See, I thought you were just worried he was going to look too much like Mr. Tumnus.
No, because it's on his elbows.
Oh.
His elbows are out. I might go fetch it, but I'll wait till you're reading, and then I'll run so that whoever is here can enjoy. And there isn't silence.
Okay.
I'll go do that. Start reading.
I don't know where we were.
All right. We were at, he'd been talking about.
Okay, he was looking through the ring. And we were talking about how creepy that could have been.
He's not disappearing.
He's not disappearing. Then they gasped. There was no sign of Tom disappearing. Tom laughed again, and then he spun the ring in the air, and it vanished with a flash. Frodo gave a cry, and Tom leaned forward and handed it back to him with a smile. I know Robin isn't here to hear this, but I feel like he might as well have just pulled it out of Frodo's ear. Like, come on. Frodo looked at it closely and rather suspiciously, like one who has lent a trinket to a juggler. See? It was the same ring, or looked the same, and weighed the same, for that ring had always seemed to Frodo to weigh strangely heavy in the hand. But something prompted him to make sure. He was perhaps a trifle annoyed with Tom for seeming to make so light of what even Gandalf thought so perilously important. Oh, I like it.
Right?
It's a good look.
It is a good look. And he needed it. It's clearly like the scarf really finishes it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, composition-wise, it was necessary.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, all of the creatures in that column are satyrs. Selenium's the one with the vitiligo.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
All right.
Careless, why don't you?
He waited for an opportunity when the talk was going again, and Tom was telling an absurd story about badgers and their queer ways. Then he slipped the ring on. Merry turned towards him to say something and gave a start and checked an exclamation. Frodo was delighted, in a way. It was his own ring, all right, for Merry was staring blankly at his chair and obviously could not see him. He got up and crept quietly away from the fireside towards the outer door. "Hey there!" cried Tom, glancing towards him with a most seeing look in his shining eyes. "Hey, come Frodo there! Where be you a-going? Old Tom Bombadil's not as blind as that yet. Take off your golden ring. Your hand's more fair without it. Come back, leave your game and sit down beside me. We must talk a while more and think about the morning. Tom must teach the right road and keep your feet from wandering." Frodo laughed, trying to feel pleased, and taking off the ring he came and sat down again. Tom now told them that he reckoned the sun would shine tomorrow, and it would be a glad morning, and setting out would be hopeful. But they would do well to start early, for weather in that country was a thing that even Tom could not be sure of for long, and it would change sometimes quicker than he could change his jacket. "I am no weather master," he said, "nor is aught that goes on 2 legs," implying that possibly centipedes or some sort of beetle might control the weather. But birds definitely know.
Birds know, but birds have 2 legs, so what the hell?
No, I said birds know as in birds do not control the weather.
Birds N-O. Centipedes, sure, beetles, I could see that. What about hamsters?
I don't see why not. They have 4 legs.
Hamsters are weather masters. You heard it here first.
Tom Bombadil knows these things, man.
Yeah.
By his advice, they decided to make nearly due north from his house over the western and lower slopes of the downs. They might hope in that way to strike the east road in a day's journey and avoid the barrows. He told them not to be afraid, but to mind their own business. "Keep to the green grass. Don't you go a-meddling with old stone or cold wights or prying in their houses, unless you be strong folk with hearts that never falter." He said this more than once, and he advised them to pass barrows by on the west side if they chanced to stray near one. Then he taught them a rhyme to sing if they should by ill luck fall into any danger or difficulty the next day. "Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." When they had sung this all together after him, he clapped them each on the shoulder with a laugh, and taking candles, led them back to their bedroom. Chapter 8. Yeah. Fog on the Barrow Downs.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. Chekhov, what are you doing with that gun? That night they heard no noises, but either in his dreams or out of them, he could not tell which, Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a grey rain curtain, and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back, and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. The vision melted into waking, and there was Tom whistling like a tree full of birds, and the sun was already slanting down the hill and through the open window. Outside, everything was green and pale gold. After breakfast, which they again ate alone, they made ready to say farewell, as nearly heavy of heart as was possible on such a morning, cool, bright, and clean under a washed autumn sky of thin blue. The air came fresh from the northwest. Their quiet ponies were almost frisky, sniffing and moving restlessly. Tom came, frisky. Tom came out of the house and waved his hat and danced upon the doorstep, bidding the hobbits to get off and be off, to get up and be off and go with good speed. They rode off along a path that wound away behind the house and went slanting up towards the north end of the hill brow under which it sheltered. They had just dismounted to lead their ponies up the last steep slope when suddenly Frodo stopped. "Goldberry!" he cried. "My fair lady, clad all in silver green." That's a normal way to describe your friend.
Yeah.
"We have never said farewell to her, nor seen her since the evening." He was so distressed that he turned back. But at that moment a clear call came rippling down. There on the hill brow she stood, beckoning to them. Her hair was flying loose, and as it caught the sun, it shone and shimmered. A light like the glint of water on dewy grass flashed from under her feet as she danced. They hastened up the last slope and stood breathless beside her. They bowed, but with a wave of her arm she bade them look round, and they looked out from the hilltop over lands under the morning. It was now as clear and far seen as it had been veiled and misty when they stood upon the knoll in the forest, which could now be seen rising pale and green out of the dark trees in the west. In that direction the land rose in wooded ridges, green, yellow, russet under the sun, beyond which lay hidden the valley of the Brandywine. To the south, over the line of the Withywindle, there was a distant glint like pale glass where the Brandywine River made a great loop in the lowlands and flowed away out of the knowledge of hobbits. Every time I say Brandywine River, I think about the fact that it's actually called the Brandywine.
Yep. It's just a bastardization, you know. Branduin. Oh, incidentally, speaking of brandy and wine,
Yes.
is not wine vinegar is not wine. Am I correct?
Yeah?
Jason was having issues going through the pantry. He was like, "You have like 4 kinds of wine in here." And I was like, "We have red wine and white wine and red wine vinegar and white wine vinegar. And that is only 2 kinds of wine." He was like, "They're called wine." And I was like, "We are going to argue about this." So we did.
Well, he's wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah, wine vinegar is not wine. It has no alcohol content. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, not the same thing at all. And then I was like, and what he thought that was excessive, and I was like, look deeper because we also have rice wine vinegar and balsamic vinegar and white vinegar and apple cider vinegar. And
That still doesn't sound excessive to me. We also have
no,
all of those types of vinegar.
exactly, they're all for different things.
Yeah, you can't use like red wine vinegar in a recipe that calls for rice vinegar. Like,
That would be foolish.
that would be gross.
It would be so gross. And we use white vinegar for all of our cleaning, but we use apple cider vinegar for all of my tonics. And yeah, it's put balsamic vinegar in my banana bread.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, like you can't clean anything with balsamic vinegar.
No.
I mean, you could try, but it'd be very sticky.
Like making apple pie with pineapples. Like, well, the apple was in the name.
I feel like it'd be more like, I don't know, I have to think of a better metaphor. I'll come back to that.
Do.
Northward beyond the dwindling downs, the land ran away in flats and swellings of gray and green and pale earth colors until it faded into a featureless and shadowy distance. Eastward the Barrow Downs rose, ridge behind ridge, into the morning, and vanished out of eyesight into a guess. It was no more than a guess of blue and a remote white glimmer blending with the hem of the sky, but it spoke to them out of memory and old tales of the high and distant mountains. They took a deep draught of the air and felt that a skip and a few stout strides would bear them wherever they wished. It seemed faint-hearted to go jogging aside over the crumpled skirts of the downs toward the road, when they should be leaping as lusty as Tom over the stepping stones of the hills straight towards the mountains. Goldberry spoke to them and recalled their eyes and thoughts. "Speed now, fair guests," she said, "and hold to your purpose. North with the wind in the left eye and a blessing on your footsteps. Make haste while the sun shines." And to Frodo she said, "Farewell, elf friend. It was a merry meeting." But Frodo found no words to answer. He bowed low and mounted his pony, and followed by his friends jogged slowly down the gentle slope behind the hill. Tom Bombadil's house in the valley and the forest were lost to view. The air grew warmer between the green walls of hillside and hillside, and the scent of turf rose strong and sweet as they breathed. Turning back when they reached the bottom of the green hollow, they saw Goldberry, now small and slender like a sunlit flower against the sky. She was standing still watching them, and her hands were stretched out towards them. As they looked, she gave a clear call, and lifting up her hand she turned and vanished behind the hill. Their way wound along the floor of the hollow and round the green feet of a steep hill into another deeper and broader valley, and then over the shoulder of further hills and down their long limbs and up their smooth sides again, up onto new hilltops and down into new valleys. There was no tree nor any visible water. It was a country of grass and short springy turf, silent except for the whisper of the air over the edges of the land, and high lonely cries of strange birds. As they journeyed, the sun mounted and grew hot. Each time they climbed a ridge, the breeze seemed to have grown less. When they caught a glimpse of the country westward, the distant forest seemed to be smoking, as if the fallen rain was steaming up again from leaf and root and mold. A shadow now lay round the edge of sight, a dark haze, above which the upper sky was like a blue cap, hot and heavy. Heavy, black, and pendulous. About midday, they came to a hill whose top was wide and flattened, like a shallow saucer with a green mounded rim. That doesn't at all seem ominous or man-made, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Dumb.
Yeah.
Inside, there was no air stirring, and the sky seemed near their heads. They rode across and looked northwards. Then their hearts rose, for it seemed plain that they had come further already than they had expected. Certainly, the distance had now all become hazy and deceptive, but there could be no doubt that the downs were coming to an end. A long valley lay below them, winding away northwards, until it came to an opening between two steep shoulders. Beyond, there seemed to be no more hills. Due north, they faintly glimpsed a long, dark line. "That is a line of trees," said Mary, "and that must mark the road. All along it for many leagues east of the bridge there are trees growing. Some say they were planted in the old days." "Splendid," said Frodo. "If we make as good going this afternoon as we have done this morning, we shall have left the downs before the sun sets and be jogging on in search of a camping place." But even as he spoke, he turned his glance eastwards, and he saw that on that side the hills were higher and looked down upon them. And all those hills were crowned with green mounds, and on some were standing stones, pointing upwards like jagged teeth out of green gums.
Yeah.
That view was somehow disquieting. No shit.
That's a little.
So they turned from the sight and went down into the hollow circle. Dude! I forgot how dumb this part is.
Yep.
In the midst of
Don't
it,
go in there. Don't go in there.
seriously, I'm like, okay, don't go near the Barrow Downs. Great, we won't. We'll just go to this hill with like a hollow circle in the middle with a standing stone right in the middle of that. I haven't described it yet, but it's going to be there.
Yeah. And it's
and
cold, as though the sun had no power to warm it, which was nice.
And at that time, well, let me get to that. Hang on. In the midst of it, there stood a single stone, standing tall under the sun above, and at this hour casting no shadow. It was shapeless and yet significant, like a landmark or a guarding finger, or more like a warning.
Yeah. Yeah, one of them.
But they were now hungry, and the sun was still at the fearless noon, so they set their backs against the east side of the stone. The east side of the stone, no less.
Side of the stone, yeah.
Yet, oh my god. It was cool, as if the sun had no power to warm it. But at that time, this seemed pleasant.
Yay!
Guys,
Yeah.
my dudes, my bros.
You're so dumb.
You're so dumb.
So dumb.
And there they took food and drink and made as good a noon meal under the open sky as anyone could wish. For the food came from down under hill. Tom had provided them with plenty for the comfort of the day, and their ponies unburdened straight upon the grass. Riding over the hills and eating their fill, the warm sun and the scent of turf, lying a little too long, stretching out their legs and looking at the sky above their noses. These things are, perhaps, enough to explain what happened. Nope.
Nope.
However that may be, they woke suddenly and uncomfortably from a sleep they had never meant to take. The standing stone was cold, and it cast a long pale shadow that stretched eastward over them. The sun, a pale and watery yellow, was gleaming through the mist just above the west wall of the hollow in which they lay. North, south, and east beyond the wall, the fog was thick, cold, and white. The air was silent, heavy, and chill. Their ponies were standing crowded together with their heads down. The hobbits sprang to their feet in alarm and ran to the western rim. They found that they were upon an island in the fog. Even as they looked out in dismay towards the setting sun, it sank before their eyes into a white sea, and a cold gray shadow sprang up in the east behind. The fog rolled up to the walls and rose above them, and as it mounted, it bent over their heads until it became a roof. They were shut in a hall of mist, whose central pillar was the standing stone.
Now at least it would be a good time to hold still and wait for the fog to lift so that nothing bad can happen. Nope.
They should split up and search the house is what they should do. There's a noise down in the basement.
The call is coming from the attic. Go up and check.
They felt as if a trap was closing about them, no shit, but they did not quite lose heart. They still remembered the hopeful view they had had of the line of the road ahead, and they still knew in which direction it lay. In any case, they now had so great a dislike for that hollow place about the stone that no thought of remaining there was in their minds. They packed up. Huh?
I guess that's fair enough, but I seriously would have just sat down and been like, okay, I'll wait.
They would have had to spend the whole night there, though. I feel like that wouldn't have been any better, really.
It would, because they're still not east of any of the barrows.
Yeah, that's fair. But that hill is a barrow. Isn't it? That's
No.
the whole standing stone. Oh, well, in that case, they should have stayed there.
Yeah, they totally should have.
Let's see. In any case, they now have blah. They packed up as quickly as their chilled fingers would work. Soon they were leading their ponies in single file over the rim and down the long northward slope of the hill, down into a foggy sea. As they went down, the mist became colder and damper, and their hair hung lank and dripping on their foreheads. When they reached the bottom, it was so cold that they halted and got out cloaks and hoods, which soon became bedewed with gray drops. Then, mounting their ponies, they went slowly on again, feeling their way by the rise and fall of the ground. They were steering, as well as they could guess, for the gate-like opening at the far northward end of the long valley which they had seen in the morning. Once they were through the gap, they had only to keep on in anything like a straight line, and then they were bound in the end to strike the road. Their thoughts did not go beyond that, except for a vague hope that perhaps away beyond the downs there might be no fog. Their going was very slow. To prevent their getting separated and wandering in different directions, they went in file with Frodo leading. Sam was behind him, and after him came Pippin and then Merry.
That also upsets me. It's so much easier to lose people in single file than abreast.
Right? Like, how are you riding before? That you were just wandering around? Is this like me in a Target where people just take off in random directions?
Right? And none of you brought any rope that you could use to, like, keep track of each other?
This is just a disaster from start to finish, really.
Yeah, let's highlight the naivete of our heroes as they begin their adventure, so that later, when they're real badasses, it's even more impressive.
It's impressive that they even got out of this situation.
That might be a good time for the rhyme. Is anyone going to remember that?
No.
Suddenly,
Frodo saw a hopeful sign. On either side, ahead, a darkness began to loom through the mist, and he guessed that they were at last approaching the gap in the hills, the north gate of the Barrow Downs. If they could pass that, they would be free. Come on, follow me, he called back over his shoulder, and he hurried forward. But his hope soon changed to bewilderment and alarm. The dark patches grew darker, but they shrank, and suddenly he saw, towering ominous before him and leaning slightly together, or slightly towards one another like the pillars of a headless door, 2 huge standing stones. He could not remember having seen any sign of these in the valley when he looked out from the hill in the morning. He had passed between them almost before he was aware, and even as he did so, darkness seemed to fall around them. His pony reared and snorted, and he fell off. When he looked back, he found that he was alone. The others had not followed him. Sam, he called. Pippin, Mary, come along. Why don't you keep up? There was no answer. Fear took him, and he ran back past the stones, shouting wildly. Sam! Sam! Mary! Pippin! The pony bolted into the mist and vanished. From some way off,
and broke his leg.
Fell against a tree with his hand against his forehead.
Yeah. This is Kim Basinger levels of damsel in distress crap here.
From some way off, or so it seemed, he thought he heard a cry. Hoy! Frodo! Hoy! It was away eastward, on his left as he stood under the great stones, staring and straining into the gloom. He plunged off in the direction of the call, like a dumbass, and found himself going steeply uphill.
We love you, Frodo. I'm not saying I would have done better than that, but yeah.
As he struggled on, he called again, and kept on calling more and more frantically. But he heard no answer for some time, and then it seemed faint and far ahead and high above him. Frodo, hoy! Came the thin voices out of the mist, and then a cry that sounded like, help! Help! Often repeated, ending with a last help that trailed off into a long wail, suddenly cut short. He stumbled forward with all the speed he could towards the cries, but the light was now gone, and clinging night had closed about him, so that it was impossible to be sure of any direction. He seemed all the time to be climbing up and up. Only the change in the level of the ground at his feet told him when he at last came to the top of a ridge or hill. He was weary, sweating, and yet chilled. It was wholly dark. Where are you? He cried out miserably. There was no reply. He stood listening. He was suddenly aware that it was getting very cold, and that up here a wind was beginning to blow, an icy wind. A change was coming in the weather. The mist was flowing past him now in shreds and tatters. His breath was smoking, and the darkness was less near and thick. He looked up and saw with surprise that faint stars were appearing overhead amid the strands of hurrying cloud and fog. The wind began to hiss over the grass. He imagined suddenly that he caught a muffled cry, and he made towards it. And even as he went forward, the mist was rolled up and thrust aside, and the starry sky was unveiled. A glance showed him that he was now facing southwards, and was on a round hilltop which he must have climbed from the north. Out of the east a biting wind was blowing. To his right there loomed against the westward stars a dark black shape. A great barrow stood there. Where are you? He cried again, both angry and afraid. Here, said a voice, deep and cold, that seemed to come out of the ground. I am waiting for you. No, said Frodo, but he did not run away. His knees gave, and he fell on the ground. Nothing happened, and there was no sound. Trembling, he looked up, in time to see a tall, dark figure like a shadow against the stars. It leaned over him. He thought there were 2 eyes, very cold, though lit with a pale light that seemed to come from some remote distance. Then a grip stronger and colder than iron seized him. The icy touch froze his bones, and he remembered no more.
The end. Bye.
And then they all died. The Lord of the Rings is actually a very short book. The rest of this is just blank pages to confuse you.
Yes, you have been duped all your life.
Peter Jackson made the rest up.
I've suddenly had this vision. I'd never thought about it before, but suppose there's like an evil spirit bar where the Nazgul and the Barrow WHATs meet up, and the Nazgul are like, we chased these 4 little fuckers all over the Shire and damn it, we never did get our hands on them. And the Barrow WHATs are like, really? Kidding? All I needed was fog. Like, and I had them for lunch. I mean, granted, it got me destroyed eventually, but like, yeah. How did you have trouble?
Well, the Nazgul can't create fog, and fog is a hobbit's great weakness. Fog and shoes are the hobbit's two great weaknesses.
And lunch. Three. They have three weaknesses.
Among their main weaknesses are fog, shoes, lunch, and an almost fanatical hatred of adventures. Oh, shit. We're going to have to come in again.
Oh. Yes, fog is hobbit kryptonite.
There wasn't this much fog in the movie The Fog. When he came to himself again for a moment... Oh, I sound way too cheerful starting that. When he came to himself again, he was dying.
He was being murdered by a disembodied hand with a sword.
It was terrible, and he was very upset.
His friends looked like they might be dead.
He could recall nothing except a sense of dread.
Stop it. Oh, man.
I don't know if I can read it in a sad voice now.
It's okay. Dread. Okay, coldness and fog and foolishness and
dread.
Dread. Lots of dread.
Then suddenly he knew that he was imprisoned, caught hopelessly. He was in a barrow. A Barrow WHAT had taken him, and he was probably already under the dreadful spells of the Barrow WHATs about which whispered tales spoke. He dared not move, but lay as he found himself, flat on his back upon a cold stone, with his hands on his breast. But though his fear was so great that it seemed to be part of the very darkness that was round him, he found himself as he lay thinking about Bilbo Baggins and his stories, of their jogging along together in the lanes of the Shire and talking about roads and adventures. There was a seed of courage hidden, often deeply, it is true, in the heart of even the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor very timid. Indeed, though he did not know it, Bilbo and Gandalf had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire. He didn't know it because Gandalf is a nagging asshole who never says anything nice.
That's true.
He thought he had come to the end of his adventure, and a terrible end, but the thought hardened him. He found himself stiffening as if for a final spring. He no longer felt limp like a helpless prey. As he lay there, thinking and getting a hold of himself, in the context of the thought hardening him, that's a weird thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But look, your kink is not my kink, but your kink is okay. He noticed all at once that the darkness was slowly giving way. A pale greenish light was growing round him. It did not, at first, show him what kind of a place he was in, for the light seemed to be coming out of himself, and from the floor beside him, and had not yet reached the roof or wall. He turned, and there in the cold glow he saw lying beside him Sam, Pippin, and Merry. They were on their backs, and their faces looked deathly pale, and they were clad in white. I love that the Barrow WHAT takes the time to undress them and redress them in white outfits, like, just for the aesthetic.
Yep. Barrow WHATs are artists.
Barrow WHATs are dramatic hoes.
Yes, they're artistic dramatic hoes. But it bothers me that they didn't bother with Frodo. Like, he was late to the party, so he didn't get a costume.
Look, man, if you're going to show up late, sometimes you're all out of white outfits. I mean, how many Hobbit-sized white outfits do you expect a Barrow WHAT to stock at any given time? Just in case.
I had 3 shrouds. 3 shrouds. You're just going to have to stay in your fucking vest.
I wasn't expecting such a rush. Also, please remind me, Barrow WHATs are dramatic hoes is the tagline for this episode.
Excellent.
Let's see. They were all clad in white. About them lay many treasures of gold, maybe. though in that light they looked cold and unlovely. On their heads were circlets, gold chains were about their waists, and on their fingers were many rings. Swords lay by their sides, and shields were at their feet, but across their 3 necks lay one long, naked sword. Suddenly a song...
Dramatic hoe layout, if ever I saw one.
What?
That's a dramatic hoe layout, if ever I saw one.
I'm saying. And now they're going to sing about it before they kill them.
Yes.
Drams. Suddenly a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves. Grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. Never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. He heard behind his head a creaking and scraping sound. Raising himself on one arm, he looked, and saw now in the pale light that they were in a kind of passage which behind them turned a corner. Round the corner a long arm was groping, walking on its fingers towards Sam. Hang on. Here we go. Walking on its fingers towards Sam, who was lying nearest.
Bad company. Thing has fallen into bad company.
I don't think you can see, but I was like doing the walking on fingers thing.
I did. I saw.
Yeah. Towards Sam, who was lying nearest, and towards the hilt of the sword that lay upon him. At first, Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring whether the Barrow Wight would miss him, and he might find some way out. He thought of himself, running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do. But the courage that had been awakened in him was now too strong. He could not leave his friends so easily. He wavered, groping in his pocket, and then fought with himself again, and as he did so, the arm crept nearer. Suddenly resolve hardened in him, and he seized a short sword that lay beside him, and kneeling he stooped low over the bodies of his companions. With what strength he had, he hewed at the crawling arm near the wrist, and the hand broke off. But at the same moment the sword splintered up to the hilt. There was a shriek, and the light vanished. In the dark there was a snarling noise. Okay, I'm going to pause here just for a second because this has always bothered me.
Yeah?
The thing that Gollum recites in the movie, cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be travelers far from home. They do not see what lies ahead when sun has failed and moon is dead. That sounds like this poem, but it's not, and I can never figure out where they pulled that from.
They pulled it from this poem and then they added to it.
Oh. Okay, that makes sense.
It doesn't show up anywhere else.
It's like very in tone with this poem.
Yeah.
Okay. Frodo fell over Merry, and Merry's face felt cold. All at once back into his mind, from which it had disappeared with the first coming of the fog, like a dumbass, came the memory of the house down under the hill, and of Tom singing. He remembered the rhyme that Tom had taught them. In a small, desperate voice he began, "Ho, Tom Bombadil!" And with that name his voice seemed to grow strong. It had a full and lively sound, and the dark chamber echoed as if to drum and trumpet. And he says the song again, which we don't need to repeat because we already read it. Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, and so forth.
By the Wooded Hill, by the Reed and Willow, blah, 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 blah. Our need is near us.
There was a sudden deep silence, in which Frodo could hear his heart beating. After a long, slow moment, he heard plain but far away, as if it was coming down through the ground or through thick walls, an answering voice singing. Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster. There was a loud rumbling sound as of stones rolling and falling, and suddenly light streamed in, real light, the plain light of day. A low door-like opening appeared at the end of the chamber beyond Frodo's feet, and there was Tom's head, hat, feather, and all, framed against the light of the sun rising red behind him.
Question.
Yes.
Does Tom teleport, or did he just have a feeling that they were in this particular barrow and he was just waiting for them to call?
Or is Tom able to leap from hill to hill so that he can get there from his house in like 5 hops?
Right? Or I had another idea. Can't remember what it was. The song is an incantation that actually summons him like some kind of demon.
He is an eldritch being. Like he's a funny one, but he's pretty eldritch. Let's see. The light fell upon the floor and upon the faces of the 3 hobbits lying beside Frodo. They did not stir, but the sickly hue had left them. They looked now as if they were only very deeply asleep. Tom stooped, removed his hat, and came into the dark chamber, singing, Get out, you old wight, vanish in the sunlight. Blah, blah, blah. Lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand forever shut, till the world is mended. At these words there was a cry, and the part of the inner end of the chamber fell in with a crash. Then there was a long trailing shriek, fading away into an unguessable distance. And after that, silence. Come, friend Frodo, said Tom, let us get out onto clean grass. You must help me bear them. Together they carried out Merry, Pippin, and Sam. As Frodo left the barrow for the last time, he thought he saw a severed hand wriggling still, like a wounded spider, in a heap of fallen earth. Tom went back in again, and there was a sound of much thumping and stamping.
God.
Ew.
Oh.
When he came out, he was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure, things of gold, silver, copper, and bronze, many beads and chains and jeweled ornaments. He climbed the green barrow and laid them all on top in the sunshine. There he stood with his hat in his hand and the wind in his hair, and looked down upon the 3 hobbits that had been laid upon their backs on the grass at the west side of the mound. Raising his right hand, he said in a clear, commanding voice, Wake now, my merry lads, wake and hear me calling. Warm now be heart and limb, the cold stone is fallen. Dark door is standing wide, dead hand is broken. Night under night is flown, and the gate is open. To Frodo's great joy, the hobbits stirred, stretched their arms, rubbed their eyes, and then suddenly sprang up. They looked about in amazement, first at Frodo and then at Tom standing large as life on the barrow top above them, and then at themselves in their thin white rags, crowned and belted with pale gold, and jingling with trinkets. What in the name of wonder? Began Merry, feeling the golden circlet that had slipped over one eye. Then he stopped, and a shadow came over his face, and he closed his eyes. Of course, I remember, he said. The men of Carn Dûm came on us at night, and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart! He clutched at his breast. No, he said, opening his eyes. What am I saying? I have been dreaming. Where did you get to, Frodo? I thought that I was lost, said Frodo, but I don't want to speak of it. Let us think of what we are to do now. Let us go on.
I fucked up. I fucked up good. That's what happened. Let's just not talk about it anymore.
Let's never speak of this again. Moving along, nothing to see here.
Not the hot issue. Really, it's not.
Oh, I'm trying to decide if that's a
Good stopping place.
Good stopping place. We have like 4 minutes left, so
Keep going.
all right. Dressed up like this, sir? Said Sam. Where are my clothes? He flung his circlet belt and rings on the grass and looked around helplessly, as if he expected to find his cloak, jacket, and breeches and other hobbit garments laying somewhere to hand. He was looking for his bra.
Yeah.
You won't find your clothes again, said Tom, bounding down from the wall.
I've heard that after certain nights. Go ahead.
No comment. Let's see. And laughing as he danced around them in the sunlight. One would have thought that nothing dangerous or dreadful had happened. And indeed, the horror faded out of their hearts as they looked at him and saw the merry glint in his eyes. Tom is basically my tone starting this section. Just like, it's terrible. You're never going to see your clothes again.
They were pawned by an evil spirit.
What do you mean? Asked Pippin, looking at him, half puzzled and half amused. Why not? But Tom shook his head, saying, You found yourselves again out of the deep water. Clothes are but little loss if you escape from drowning. Be glad, my merry friends, and let the warm sunlight heat now heart and limb. Cast off these cold rags. Run naked on the grass while Tom goes a-hunting. Weird. He sprang away downhill, whistling and calling. Looking down after him, Frodo saw him running away southwards along the green hollow between their hill and the next, still whistling and crying. Hey now, come hoy now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near, far, here, there, yonder. Sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail and bumpkin. White socks, my little lad, and old fatty lumpkin.
Wise nose, not wise noise.
Oh, sorry. I was going fast.
Although now I really want a pony with wise noise.
That makes one of us.
Aw.
I'm not a horse person.
Check.
So he sang, running fast, tossing up his hat and catching it, until he was hidden by a fold of the ground. But for some time his hey now, hoy now came floating back down the wind, which had shifted round towards the south. And that's the end of a section, so that's a great place to stop.
Yay! The hobbits are naked.
That was a...
Frolicking.
They're what now?
Naked and frolicking. He said.
Yes, he did. He did say.
Strip off the shroud and run around. And I don't see any reason not to engage in that activity right there. You know, assuming I'm a hobbit.
Seems chilly, but you do you.
Well, right now here, sure, but...
I mean, like, at sunrise.
No. Yeah. It's a warm sunrise. Besides, is it sunrise? No, it's like late in the morning by now, isn't it?
I thought it was like sunrise when Tom, like...
I don't know. I don't think it's written down anywhere what time of day it was.
I guess we'll never know.
Oh my god, something we won't know about Middle-earth. I take it back. It's definitely written down somewhere.
I just need to say this for the benefit of everyone watching at home. The phrase that just went across my mind when you said, oh my god, was, oh my god, they were two mates.
Oh, it's 8 o'clock.
Sure is.
I can't get outside from here soon enough.
Hasn't started at my house yet.
That was great. Thank you for reading.
You are welcome. It was my pleasure, and I will see you probably day after tomorrow, unless things get weird at work.
Things get weird. Ein Minuten bitte. Oh. Yes. And I doubtless will not manage to work on this in the interim, so I'm sure I'll come back to it. It's so pretty.
It's very pretty.
Yes. All right. Our hobbits will get badass. And you have to start somewhere. And I'm sure I've done things that stupid. I'll tell you about Pat and Jorge sometime.
Given that that's a story I've yet to hear, that frightens me because I've the stories I have heard are already quite zippy. So yes, well,
It should take 2 minutes. You want to hear the Pat and Jorge story?
sure.
Once upon a time, I was 18. I was at Denny's and I had a head cold. And I had a sofa that I was welcome to sleep on, but no way to get there. So I was kind of sad and feeling sorry for myself. And these two gentlemen who I'd never met before, whose names were Pat and Jorge, were like, "We'll give you a ride to your crash pad." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much. That would be wonderful." So I got in the car and they were like, "Can we stop at our house first?" And I was like, this is how those segments in 60 minutes start. But yeah, sure, we can do that. Because the thing was, the things that they were saying in like secondhand sound creepy, but there was no creepy vibe at all. So we stop at their house. I go in and they passed around a joint and I took a puff to be polite and I'm real lightweight. So now I'm stoned with a head cold and they're like not anxious to get me to my squat and I was getting kind of impatient and they were like, "Come on downstairs to the basement." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go down to the basement," because again, creepy words, no creepy vibe. And at this point, I'm like, whatever it takes, I will jump rope if that's what it takes for me to get to my place to sleep. So I go down to this basement. And it's a perfectly comfortable, carpeted, well-lit recording studio. And they're like, "We really like your voice. Could you please sing it into this mic for a little while and then we'll take you to where you're sleeping?" And I was like, that's the weirdest request anyone's ever made of me. And I'm stoned and I have a head cold. So, yes. So I sang into the mic. And they didn't have any specific requests. So I sang a couple of like ballads and then they weren't making any move to leave, so I just sang the holy name of Bangkok for a while. And at that point they must have thought I was speaking in tongues and they were like, "Wow, okay, yeah, thank you, we've got that recorded, we'll let you know if we use it for anything." And then they took me to my crash pad and dropped me off and I said thanks and that was it. It was
Sure.
and there were definitely points where I was thinking, this is just too obviously creepy to be actually creepy. Like, "Hey, strange girl that we promised a ride to, come down to the basement." I'm like, well, I am armed and I can sneeze all over them. So, yeah.
I feel like your logic is faulty, but that was 20 years ago and you're still alive, so
My logic was very faulty. I was following intuition, not logic. That's always been my bag anyway, but yeah. And now I have the Pat and Jorge story, and I don't think I ever saw them again. And I have no idea what they did with that recording. So if you still exist out there, Pat and Jorge, hi. I wasn't speaking in tongues.
I like how we just got done ragging on Frodo and the hobbits for like an hour about making really terrible decisions that sound like horror movie decisions. And you're just over here like, remember that time when I let two strange men take me to their house and take me down in the basement, which was soundproofed?
Oh, it wasn't soundproofed. It just
And it was
had
a shit recording studio.
yeah, well that.
I just assumed when you said recording studio.
Studio.
Um,
Like, it was the whole basement. They had like a dozen guitars and shit. They were musicians. That's it. They didn't give me a creepy vibe because they weren't axe murderers. They were musicians.
Look, I'm not saying that Venn diagram is circular, but like, there's got to be some overlap. Like, everything I know of
Saying
musicians.
to Frodo and Company in this chapter that's the kind of decision that while I rag on them, it's not understandable.
That is a lovely and empathetic thing to say with which I really can't relate.
Yeah, no, they're the smart one. Well, the
I was
smart
gonna say you just got all the risk-taking genes in the family. By the time you were done, it was like, well, she took all of them already. There's none left for me. What?
I sure hope my kids feel that way. Like they can rebel by never making a stupid decision.
Here's hoping. All right. I'm going to go eat some dinner. I haven't had any yet.
All right, enjoy it. I love you.
I love you too.
Cuidado.
Te amas.